Welcome, classmates, teachers, our guests, to the celebration of our 50th year of graduation from Washington High School. We ended the 45-year program with pictures of our individual 8th grade classes combined into one. 4 years later, on Friday night, May 31st, 1963, 179 seniors would have our pictures taken together, all wearing purple caps and gowns. It would be our final time together as students in Washington High School. School days at last were over, bringing to an end one of the most unique times in our lives. Thanks to Janice and Bill, listen to a toast from Charlie Collenberg given at our senior farewell banquet held in the Little Gym.
Here's a toast to the seniors, the class of 1963. This toast is not to praise the achievements of any individual, but it is a tribute to the entire senior class. Do you remember the first few days when we entered Washington High School? We came from separate ways and met in these halls. The past 4 years have bonded us together in friendship and trust. Soon, the bonds of friendship will be tested, as we will leave these halls and again go our separate ways. We walked down the first floor corridor and couldn't help but notice the seniors, knowing that one day we would be in their shoes. Today is that day. Since 1959, we have acquired the scholarship, leadership, and character that is essential in gaining our goals in the future. We have accomplished many things since that freshman year, things that we can all be proud to be a part of. The seniors have contributed to the accomplishments of every club, team, and organization, and have been vital cogs in their functions. Every one of us has made a contribution to this class, and that contribution was needed. Many of us were nervous and frightened as we entered the doors of Washington High School, but in a few weeks we will be just as nervous and just as frightened as we close these doors and enter the world. Someday we will return to these halls and relive many of the memories we have accumulated during the 4 years we spent here, years devoted in the best way we know how. There is a phrase that I would like to have you think about as you leave here. It is, "May old acquaintances be remembered and your cup of kindness filled." This phrase seems to sum up the future and the way we will remember each other. Here's to us tonight.
Tonight we're going to buzz the gut, merging memories of those 4 years with some stories of our teachers and our classmates during the next 50. Although our journey tonight is a tad on the lighter side, the pictures and the stories cannot begin to reflect on all the triumphs and struggles they and we have experienced in high school and after to get here tonight. We've all grieved the loss of so many loved ones. To our knowledge, 28 of our classmates have died. Although we all had marched to the music of a different drummer, no matter whether we came to live near or far from our hometown, whether we did or did not go on to college was irrelevant. Our seemingly unique experiences all had universal messages and lessons, and we were all learning them. The Neshoto Annual from 1923 showed the architect's rendering, the landscaping was yet undone, of the new school in its first year of classes. One of our classmates' father was in that first graduating class at Washington High School in 1923. Does our classmate know who I'm talking about? Arthur Joseph School days at last weren't over for a cast of characters who'd been and would remain on stage and immortalized in our memories forever. They came here to teach, and 2 of our teachers taught on the day that our first classes opened in September 1922. Johnny Croppa, who'd teach for 46 years, Walter Johnson for 41 years. Dean Barber would start 2 years later teaching for 40 years. There are 4 teachers we all shared, well, sorta. If you were a female, you went to her room. Ruth deaned and taught for 38 years. He was in the other room for some of his 32 years. And this was his look as you walked in to sit down. Your first thought, now what did I do wrong? But after a brief conversation, he usually softened up with a smirky smile and a quick-witted, gravelly-voiced comment. Herding cattle could have been the job description for the two other teachers we shared. Mrs. Chia taught for 41 years. Our school was only 8 years old when our classmate's father taught his first class at Washington High School in 1930. Coach Swearingen taught for 38 years. The gymnasium was the only room we all took a class in. You didn't have to bring a pencil or a notebook. You weren't supposed to sit still. You could talk with your classmates out loud, and there was no chalkboard. And it was the only classroom that had a horse in it. Ruth Lee sent pictures of our teachers who taught for 25 years or more. This picture was taken some 17 years after our graduation. In the lower left-hand corner, Sam Simino, 33 years. For us Washington grade schoolers, Miss Ellen Charter, who taught 4th grade for 53 years, retiring in 1993. Sitting next to Miss Charter, Mary Scott, our 3rd grade teacher. One more picture for two faces not on the other. For us Washington grade schoolers, Miriam Amstead, 5th grade teacher for 39 years, and Coach Swearingen. We came here to learn, and some of us were better at it than others. There were 27 classmates who made the National Honor Society, an impressive achievement in its own. But the Two Rivers Chamber of Commerce notched the status one level higher by recognizing the top 10% of our class, or 17 classmates, in a category equivalent to the Phi Beta Kappa found at universities. All of them smartly dressed. Note that Carol, Judy, Mary are all wearing white gloves. Apparently Jean, Sue, and Chris didn't get the email from Mr. Cromer saying that he'd like them to be worn. Didn't you ever wonder who was the smartest of them all? Whose GPA was at the top? Well, I did, so I called the high school asking them to tell me, and of course they wouldn't. I threatened to bring our classmate's attorney, Jim Swearingen, who'd invoked the Freedom of Information Act, also to no avail. But maybe the answer was lying in the newspaper article, as Gene Holtman was singularly recognized that evening cum laude. Now you know the rest of the story, even if you didn't wonder. Our principal, Earl Cromer, started teaching in 1924 as a math instructor. Look at those dreamy eyes. 43 years at Washington High School. Their stage set the stage for our stage. Melvin Highroth would teach 37 years at Washington High School. Classmate Jean's dad taught for 28 years. Jerry Chabowski was in his 2nd year when we graduated. This classmate obtained a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Wisconsin, then a master's degree in Electrical Engineering, summa cum laude, from Purdue. In 1978, he led a team of engineers at Delco Electronics that designed the first electronically tuned receiver for General Motors. All car radios were then tuned with mechanical parts, a significant milestone in automobile technology. He then moved to Singapore, where he lived for 5.5 years to establish a circuit board manufacturing company for General Motors. Note the shift in headgear. A turban made by a chic Indian whose restaurant they regularly frequented. During this time, he traveled to 34 countries for business and pleasure. We studied together. We were clustered in basements. Phil Dunchik, the original picture, says this is you. In kitchens, note the typewriters. Note the curlers. Some of us loved some of our teachers a little more than others. Mr. Liam taught for 26 years. And they opened doors in our minds that would take some of us to places we could have never imagined. Phil Knotts graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison with a degree in chemistry, then a doctorate from Michigan State in analytical chemistry. He's worked for DuPont, Diamond Shamrock, Getty Oil, Chevron, Texaco, and 2 French companies during the past 31 years. In 1986, while working for Texaco, Phil started doing flow assurance work, well before it had a name. He became their chief engineer, involved with pipeline design and the procedures to get the water, oil, and gas from the wells to the platforms. Semi-retired, he presently teaches a 5-day offshore petroleum production course in Houston, London, Aberdeen, Scotland, which is why he is not here tonight. He says hello. Perth, Australia, Bangkok, Thailand, and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This picture was taken from his hotel room in Kuala Lumpur with a view of the Petronas Twin Towers in the background. In 2008, the progressive rebel from Two Rivers, Wisconsin, authors an amendment to the Constitution of the United States establishing new rules and standards of accountability that would hold the royalty in Washington accountable to the citizens of America. You can Google BastileAmendment.org to read the amendment. A picture of Phil with Lily, the goat herding dog, and why, you might ask, he has a goat herding dog. He's going to start a goat farm. Mr. Hurlbut, 25 years. Our annual lists all of the activities beside our names that we participated in while at Washington High School. All of these programs were created and supervised by our teachers. Didn't you ever wonder the total number of activities we could have been recognized for? I mean, the total count of them all? Well, wonder no more. Let me tell you, I counted them. 85. Our classmates were recognized for 85 different activities in our senior annual. You could have been recognized for student police, Doug Rippey and Bill Pilzak. There were 3 classmates in operetta, Diane Cornels, Jane Crabb, and John Hare. Remember the melodic voice of Leon Lauren? Didn't do opera. One classmate had the only listing for the all-school play, and he was in it all 4 years. Joe Rodkowitz. Did you even know that one of our classmates was on the posture court and reigning posture queen in 1962 as a junior? When I asked her how she'd gotten such an honor, she had no idea. Mrs. Chia told her one day she'd won. Bingo. Doesn't get any easier than that. But I know you all still have one lingering question that is just pouring through your mind. Who had the most listings alongside their name, right? Well, wonder no more. I counted them. With credit being given for each year in the activity, this student had 37. Who is it? A clue? The only classmate to hold office in 3 of our 4 years. She was the secretary in our sophomore, junior, and senior years. Yes, Judy Strodoff. Andrea Wallace had 36. Ruth Lee had 35. Mary DeFano had 32. And Jane Crabb had 30. The 6th highest listing belonged to 4 years. There's clues. He was the band major. Look at that baton. He marched with that in every parade. As far as I'm concerned, Jim, you are the posture king of our class all 4 years. It was the fall of our sophomore year, 1960. Serving the tables in the gymnasium were members of the Girls' Glee Club for a musical performance called Le Signe de Paris. The program also included the senior band, senior girls chorus, senior and junior madrigal, and the boys' glee club. Of the 9 classmates in the picture, 6 are here tonight, and they've all agreed to do a rendition of, all right, under the guidance of Mrs. Bender, Mrs. Betty Koenig. 15 years, Michael Kazar. And the leader of the band was our own. The apple didn't fall too far from the Mr. Raymer, 34 years. He probably taught the largest single class of any teacher. In our junior year, there were over 120 kids in uniform. One of our classmates took Mr. Raymer's instruction of marching in parade while playing baritone to a very different level. The chambermaids in parade. The one with an exposed armpit raising his hand, arousing the crowd, may have been a bad choice of words. Poodles. So you ask, as I did, who are the chambermaids? Well, for 20 years, he and they marched in 3 to 4 parades every year, playing music and bringing laughter and fun wherever they went. Inviting him to the torp dance would have been a hoot. If it weren't for pictures, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. She was one of the 27 on our National Honor Society. After high school, she graduated from County Teachers College and taught for 1 year. Out of high school, he went to work for Formite Tube and worked there for, and he emphasized, 5 years, 3 months, 3 days. I think he knew then he wasn't destined to retire there. When they were earning enough money from milking the cows, they quit their day jobs, going to work just about every day of the year thereafter. Their 40-acre farm is now 600 with milking cows. They had met in grade school. Their first tractor cost $350. This one, $90,000. They have 2 children. Their son works the farm full-time with some support from Dad and Mom. Some of their 5 grandchildren bicycle through their adjoining properties to visit Grandma and Grandpa. How many of us with grandchildren can say that? Beverly Gittinger. She too was on our National Honor Society. We graduated some pretty smart farmers. She graduated from the University of Wisconsin in 1967 with a bachelor's degree in elementary education. Then during the summers that followed, she traveled to Hawaii to work on her master's. Going to Hawaii for a master's. Why not? In 1972, she fell in love with a 4th-generation farmer, Lloyd Aythorpe, at a roller skating party. No more details were provided than that. They grew the farm from 250 acres to over 1,100. In 1989, they spent $150,000 to buy a rotating carousel milking machine. It cut milking time from 10.5 hours per day to less than 4. Milk production increased 30 pounds per cow per day. Prior to this machine, he'd get up at 2 a.m. in the morning to put milk on our tables. 2 a.m. every day. That one time on the farm had 400 milking cows, 200 heifers, along with 5 children. They've all left the farm. The kids to college, all degreed with no interest in farming, and they sold the cows and carousel in 2000. To my knowledge, 4 other of our classmates landed on the farm. Jan Christensen, Betty Schrader, Leslie Wolf, and Marianne Franz, and they're all here tonight. All self-employed. We played together. There are 8 of us working on the float. Most of the faces are recognizable. There's one profile just to the right of Ark. I think it's Mike Shahansky. You'll come to note in the following slides we have no pictures of us guys hanging out together. Either no one thought of bringing a camera, or just maybe our vanity levels were lower. Just an observation. Mary with 2 legs, Irene with 4, the Mariners, some of us dressed up, and some of them didn't. Each hand at the side of the podium, the world map rolled up on the top side of the blackboard, and the lecture came forth, and you'd better be listening. You didn't talk in this guy's class. If he stopped talking and he wasn't looking for an answer to a question and he was looking at you, it simply meant you weren't paying attention and he was waiting for your attention to return, and it quickly did. But we'd gather around his desk when the bell rang and he'd talk and joke with us. This classmate took geography to a higher level. Janine Brandt's undergraduate degree was from the University of Wisconsin and her doctorate from New York University in nutrition and dietetics. She then commuted 3 hours a day from New Jersey to New York University, where she taught diet and nutrition classes for 25 years. Since retirement, she's traveled with Mike to all 7 continents. Mike and Janine are huddling with the penguins in Achu Islands in Antarctica. After high school, she attended the University of Wisconsin Extension Center in Manitowoc, dropped out, went to work at Miro for a short while, dropped out, then graduated with honors from the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay. For her choice of husband, she went to Manitowoc. Yes, Manitowoc, but it turned out to be a fine choice after all. After taking over as the executive director of a debt-burdened alcohol and drug treatment center, Carol spent 20 years at Markle Manor, turning it into a professionally run rehabilitation center that had 12 in-house beds, staffed with 6 to 7 counselors, while running 2 halfway houses in Manitowoc. Thank you, Carol. Oh yes, there was another with Carol at the sleepover. Evie Easley. I've been waiting 5 years to show this picture to you all. Susan Milkert graduated from the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point with a degree in home economics. There she met her husband Larry, who graduated with a degree in paratology. Yes, paratology, a study of parasites. Okay, so a degree in home ec, food, and parasites. That makes some sense. As she said in our telephone conversation, those little buggers put food on our table. So her husband is traveling to South Africa on business for Squibb in 2001. While staying in a well-to-do college town of Bloemfontein, they couldn't help but notice the abject poverty in the nearby outlying areas. 6 years ago, our classmate convinced a small group from her church to join them on a trip to Clocolan, South Africa, just outside of Bloemfontein, to donate their time helping in the local kitchen of the church to clean, prepare, and cook enough soup that would feed 20,000 kids each week. They then get in trucks and from large vats distribute the food to the families and children along the roads as they drive through. The only requirement for the children is that they bring their own bowls. This is a type of home provided by the government. In the background, you can still see a lot of metal shacks. They visit and help administer at small hospitals and orphanages to those who have AIDS. Nelson Mandela was responsible for building new homes for the poor to live in. But according to Susan, after his death, progress has seriously slipped once again. Much of their year is spent in preparation for gathering contributions and supplies. This August, their church brought boxes filled with Sunday school materials so the kids have crayons, paper, and craft supplies to learn how to draw and write. They also helped to paint the church. This playground was purchased with funds donated from her church. This picture is in Lesotho, a nearby country. This August was their 5th trip, accompanied by their daughter, second from the left, and their 12-year-old grandson. Susan is on the right. She said to say hello. And we danced together. Pictorially, I have no actual evidence of us dancing together. We are either sitting at tables or standing, save one where there is the impression of dancing, but my take on this is that Andy dropped his pack of cigarettes or his lighter, and Chris is looking on the floor to pick it up. On May 25th, 1962, we put on our farewell to our upperclassmen and women, themed Blue Hawaii. The article in the Two Rivers Reporter read, leading the Grand March were Judy Dolan, escorted by Junior Class President William Pilzak. Judy wore a baby blue chiffon floor-length strapless gown styled with a deeper blue satin cummerbund, a matching half bow and blue rose in the back, and 2 roses down the back. No comment whatsoever was made to what Bill was wearing. The hoods. Remember the term, the hoods? The tough guys, fighters, collars of their shirts turned up. After 50 years, we've all mellowed and become the goody-goodies. Thanks to our classmates who made a donation to help defray the reunion costs. This year's budget was approximately $4,500, and 35% of that came from classmates' donations. Thank you. The Beach House Blast last night was on the tab of 4 of the heaviest drinkers in high school. Marge and Mary Ahern, Chris Liebeck, and Janice Redu. Thank you so much. Special thanks to Bill Pilzak for his meticulous work to create and maintain the website. We have regularly referred to our names and addresses in order to inform each of us of upcoming gatherings along with pictures of them and ourselves. And my own personal thanks to all classmates and spouses who provided pictures and stories of our classmates' lives. This program couldn't have happened without your help. Donna Prager and Neil Daffner will have the opportunity to attend the Packer game on October 20th against the Cleveland Browns, thanks to the thoughtful and generous donation of one of our classmates. Their names were drawn from the raffle, the proceeds from which will add to the donations from us that at the moment total $4,000. Our scholarship fund is under our control and will remain open for any contributions through the spring of next year. Any questions or comments on the scholarship fund? Talk to Janice or myself. Thanks to you who have donated. Thanks to the classmates who attended our reunion planning meetings to discuss the many details and issues that needed to be coordinated to put this evening together. A special thanks was given to Janice Redu by Judy Strodoff and Christine Liebeck in recognition for her being the chairwoman for all of our class reunions. After she had left her home for the reunion, they snuck a bird bath into her backyard. Thank you, Janice, for your dedication and attention to watching over all of the myriad of coordinations that have gone into all of them. They also presented to Bill Pilzak and myself T-shirts engraved, "Coming Home, 2 Rivers," purchased from Schrader's Department Store. On behalf of Bill and myself, thanks to you both. To our knowledge, 26 of our classmates were in the military. Thankfully, to our knowledge, no one lost their lives while in service. After basic and advanced infantry training, Phil Dunchik went to Officers Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia for the Army, graduating as a second lieutenant in the infantry. Phil then went for language training, not saying in his email what the language was, but I trust it had something to do with spending 1969 in Vietnam as a military advisor to the Vietnamese Infantry Battalion. Bob Mountain served in the Air Force for 4 years, stationed at Grand Forks, North Dakota. Bob was an aircraft mechanic performing maintenance on B-52s and KC-133s after the planes returned from missions overseas. He was an assistant crew chief on a B-52 for 1.5 years, earning the rank of Buck Sergeant, E-4, at discharge. Peter Sweetman served in the Navy for almost 4 years as an aviation electrician. He served 2 tours of duty in the Gulf of Tonkin off the coast of Vietnam aboard the aircraft carriers the USS Constellation and the USS Ranger. Only one of our 3 sets of twins, from what I know, packed a pistol. Roger Benzo served in the Air Force for 20 years and retired as a Chief Master Sergeant E-9. During this time, he was stationed at 4 different Air Force bases and served in Vietnam for a year in 1969. After retirement from the military, he worked as a civil service employee at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi until retirement in 2006. Roger spent around 40 years connected to the armed services. He holds a master's U.S. Coast Guard license and taught courses on how to become a Coast Guard captain. I've never been in the military, but that looks like a lot of stripes on his shoulder. Lee Kirchman served in the Army and was a fixed cryptographic equipment repairman. His group was responsible for encrypting coded messages. He was stationed at Camp Ku in Okinawa, Japan, for over 2 years in the late 1960s. Our classmate Mary Ann joined him, and their second child was born in Okinawa. Sergeant First Class Diane Elfner was stationed at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland and the 4th Signal Group in Frankfurt and Munich, Germany as a personnel specialist. Did he ever see a dump truck with a machine gun on the back? Did you ever see what happens to a dump truck after it gets dumped on by the enemy? John took these pictures while serving in Vietnam with the 25th Infantry as an Army Combat Engineer Captain. The Jeep was blown up a couple days later. John's been involved with a mental health care team at the Buffalo VA Medical Center, developing programs for post-traumatic stress disorder helping vets returning from Iraq and Afghanistan to deal with traumatic brain injuries and substance abuse. Thank you, John. I think this is what is called at ease in the military. Roger Hodak served in the 32nd Wisconsin Division of the Army National Guard, headquartered in Two Rivers from 1965 to 1971. He trained at Fort Benning, Georgia, stationed at various times at Fort Bliss, Texas, Camp McCoy, and Fort Ripley, Minnesota. He was a fire direction controller with the rank of E5. Don Bonfit joined the Navy in October 1963. At the age of 19, he is flown to Japan and spends almost 4 years on the USS CVA Bennington aircraft carrier, spending 3 tours in the South Coral Sea on this rescue ship. During this period, he'd spend time in Japan, Hong Kong, Philippines, Australia, and Hawaii. When I read this line in Don's military bio, at the age of 19, I was flown to Japan. I could only vaguely begin to appreciate what some of our classmates who went into the armed services just a year or so out of Washington High School, Two Rivers, Wisconsin, went through. How dramatically for some their worlds had changed. Mine had not. Jim Swearingen spent 2 years of active duty in the Navy stationed in Hawaii, where he provided legal services at a joint Navy, Army, and Air Force facility on Oahu. An additional 4 years were spent in the Naval Reserves. After serving 3 years in the Navy, Kathy Leahy Cross spent the next 35 years working in the Civil Service branch of the Defense Department. In 1999, she is responsible for establishing a worldwide benefits center for all Department of Army civilians. Acting in the equivalent of a Human Resources Department, she was the chief of the Army Benefits Center-Civilian, ABC-C, supervising a staff of 50 employees. She retired at level GS-14, one of the highest civilian rankings at that time, equivalent to a commander in the Navy or a lieutenant colonel in the Army. In deference to the classified nature of this classmate's military service, I'm unwilling to show a picture of him. If I did, he might have to, kill me. Shortly after basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, he is assigned to the seacoast town of Monterey, California, where he studies the Russian language 6 hours a day for a year. In August 1972, he begins his listening career, yes, quote, listening career, in Augsburg, Germany. Military personnel reference their locations where served as their tours of duty. Well, this 4-year leg of his listening career is known as his beer tour. He's from Two Rivers. He's in Germany, a country filled with beer houses. It doesn't get any better than this. Listening to Russian radio traffic. In 1981, while stationed in the middle of a vineyard, yes, a vineyard, better known as his wine tour years, he listens to some, quote, interesting Russian radio traffic. From what I can tell, we've got a bona fide, once upon a time, spy in the midst of our reunion tonight. He was somehow connected to the National Security Agency, the NSA. But again, as you might imagine, I'm afraid to ask just how he was connected. He learned Russian, he listened to Russians, he taught Russian. Master Sergeant Pilzak retired after 20 years in the military. Thank you to all of you for your service in our military. Nice set of fins, don't you think? And yes, some of us drank together. Those of us who did came upon this interest most honestly. Pee-wee's Bar, Kurt's Bar, Gunya's Bar, Arlene's Bar, Andy's Bar, The Diamond Bar, Hershey's Bar, Vic's Bar, Chia's Bar, Ria's Bar, Labor Hall, Harold and M's Tavern, Bucky's Tavern, Port Sandy Bay. Remember short little pops from Brooklyn? The Wonder Bar, Jack's Uptown Bar, Claude Lodell's Tavern, Mexico House, Ray's Park Inn, Spot Bar, Tannery Bar, Waverly Bar, Wisco Bar. There were 35 bars in Two Rivers in 1963. Oh yes, using our fake ID cards to get into Timber Lodge. Some of us had them. Now you might think that Katie is doing a testimonial for the White Cab Brewery since the photographer's father owned the place. No siree, Bob. This was multitasking Two Rivers style. Holding the cards in one hand with your beer in the other. Hiking up the shores of Lake Michigan with blankets and six-packs, lighting a bonfire in the sand. The regular parties along Webster's Runway, and the big one, I think it was towards the end of our senior year, when the cops showed up, raided the party. My recollection was a police officer standing on the road directing traffic as the cars left the driveway, so there'd be no accidents. I suspect no tickets were written. Giving Cootie Clarkson or Lee Goki our money to buy quarts of Black Label, then driving to the road north of TR, turning off our lights, drinking in the dark of night, returning to the community house, weaving our way through the gathered students, then off to the M&M or Phil Rohr's 7 burgers for $1, or the custard stand for hamburgers, french fries, and a Coke. When I showed this picture to Andrea, just to make sure she was all right with me using it, she gasped, "Oh my God, I looked like a vampire." Being a guy, I noticed the beautiful hair and all the Blatz beer bottles. The leg of the table clues to our last party together. How many of you remember the details of the graduation party at the Point Beach Lodge? Then all night in and around Neshoto Park. Some of us were still hanging out as the sun was beginning to show early Saturday morning. Who's the classmate that shares the same distinction with Walter Stanel, Adolf Zellner, Randy Ammerman, Sandy Dax, John Hoffman, Jill Jonas, Johnny Batan, Ronnie Bro, John Kaprowski, Tom Brigham? The first 8 names, along with Lee Spearing, were inducted into the Two Rivers High School Athletic Hall of Fame. There are currently 28 members. Lee lettered in basketball, was on the all-conference team in his 3rd year. He lettered in baseball and football, and was on the all-conference and all-state in his 4th year. He was named the team's most valuable player in all sports in his senior year. A most friendly personality and a true presence in competition. Congratulations to you, Lee, on a well-deserved honor. Your memory in perpetuity at Washington High School. Well, Two Rivers High School. We respected and loved some of our teachers because they taught with an attitude and personal demeanor that allowed the material to be more easily absorbed. A couple of our teachers set the bar really high, and this was one of them. The consummate teacher. To many he was Mr. Otto, to others Coach, and to me he was my Sunday school teacher at the Evangelical United Brethren Church on the South Side. After 40 years of teaching, one of our last teachers to retire in 1992. A note, Mr. Otto was in attendance at our reunion looking young and most alert. When his picture appeared, a spontaneous applause from all of us went to him. On the night of November 16th, 1962, the Carptown Raiders traveled to the Skunk Hollow Shipbuilders for a classic clash of bucketball. The setting was their newly built gymnasium. Size alone might markedly favor the shipbuilders, as they'd graduate 516 kids that year, while we'd graduate our much smaller 179. The lead changed hands throughout the game, but Two Rivers won 52-45, proudly handing the shipbuilders their first loss in their new gym. A note, more applause rung through the gym that night. One final minor note: the shipbuilders would finish the season 22-3 and go on to win the Division A State Basketball Championship in Madison in 1963. Kudos to our spouses from Lincoln and Manitowoc. A question for the Washington grade schoolers. For recess, we'd go across the street and play kickball. 2 captains would be chosen, and who would invariably be the first or second to be picked? Karen Mott. Whenever she'd get behind the plate, everyone in the outfield would move back 15 feet. After she kicked, they'd move back in. She could kick the ball a country mile. So glad you're here tonight, Karen. Our 4th classmate's father taught for 23 years. Ollie and I took every class he ever taught. One live memory remains of our Friday night football games, as Mr. Ward was behind the window selling tickets in the last remaining vestige of our history to Washington High School, the ticket booth. If anyone's interested in helping to restore it back to its original character, talk to Chris Liebeck or myself. Miss Lucy Dufek, 21 years. Miss Mary Dunn, 35 years. She'd begin teaching 5 years after our school had been built. Mrs. Lila Glomstead, 37 years. Lila would begin teaching the same year as Coach Swearingen. We loved some of them because they were lovable and they were good teachers. They genuinely cared about us. Images locked into a moment of our time. They never aged. Unless, of course, they showed up for a reunion. Mr. Katiza, I have pictures of you in a suit, but that's not how I remember you. I felt this far more fitting. Tony, 32 years. They must have had Tony in mind when they named this dance we might have attended after him. It was called the Ink Slinger Ball. Tony was the consummate ink slinger. Upon graduation, our classmate worked as an insurance underwriter, statistical coder, claims adjuster, professional realtor, police reservist, part-time peace officer, police dispatcher, and security dispatcher. With her interest in reading mystery novels, Gail Bonet in 2000 starts writing during the evenings with the intent of someday publishing a mystery novel. A full 11 years later, at the age of 65, it's not over till it's over. She self-publishes her first novel. Centered around the free-spirited feminine insurance investigator, the Hawaiian-born Gail lives in Honolulu. Heroine Pepper Bebeau, and don't you just love those French names? Pepper Bebeau, Robert Lintereur, always seems to get involved with murder cases. In her second book, now the part of a planned mystery series, Pepper Bebeau travels to Green Bay and Washington Island to unravel another mysterious death. Gail's webpage shows a picture of the Two Rivers lighthouse that once was. Get this, our classmate is the president of the local chapter of Sisters in Crime. Right on her webpage, Sisters in Crime. It's a females writing novel mystery group. They've let some guys in from time to time. In any given week, we saw each and every one of us in the halls, in classes, in the study halls, homerooms, coming to school, leaving school, at youth center. Whether we said hello or not, hung out together or not, the quiet thoughts we all share in our memories to this time. This was my high school. These are my teachers. And these are my classmates.